All right, verses 21 through 23. He says, and this is where we'll end tonight. So he says, once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. But now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. If you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. This is the gospel that you heard and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, and of which I, Paul, have become a servant. So now Paul takes the doctrine of this hymn and he makes it personal by pointing it directly at the Colossians relating to their testimony. He says, once you were alienated from God. What does it mean to be alienated from God? Separated, okay. Set apart, estranged. Why were we alienated from God? Because of our sin. Right? God is a holy God. We were sinners. Those two don't mix, right? And so we were separated from God. He says we were separated from God and enemies of God in our minds because of our evil behavior. Now that might seem like a strange sequence, but I think this is what he's saying. When we are separated from God, just as all of creation was corrupted, when we're separated from God, our entire being is corrupted. Okay? Our body is subject to death because of sin, right? Our mind is corrupted because of sin. Our heart, our soul, our spirit is corrupted because of sin. And so when people are alienated from God and they sin against God, because their minds are alienated from God, their mind accepts that sin, okay? And endorses that sin, okay? Maybe I did something wrong, maybe I didn't, but I liked it. I liked it, okay? And celebrates that sin. I really liked it, and I'll probably do it again. And that leads to repeating that sin or pursuing even greater sin or depravity. So what Paul is describing here is the downward spiritual spiral that happens when people are separated from God. This is kind of an individualized version of Romans chapter 1. Right? Remember there in Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through the end of I think it's verse 18 through the end of the chapter there. He talks about how basically God says to us, oh, if you want to do that, I'll let you do that. And so we do that. And he says, well, then you get there and you say, well, but then I want to do that. And God says, really? You really want to do that? I'll let you do that. And we do that. And he just goes on and he just keeps describing this darker and darker and Loster isn't a word. Loster and loster. Yeah, he just describes this downward spiral of sin and corruption in the world. And finally, down at the end of the chapter, he says, people celebrate sin. They promote sin. And that's what he's talking about here in an individualized case, I think. He's saying each of you were alienated from God, and this is what was happening to you. You were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. So what Paul is describing here is that downward spiral, and Paul says here that those who are currently in the Colossian church once lived like this. Once lived like this. Now, what's the very first word in verse 22? Okay, so yeah, in my version it's B-U-T. But God has reconciled. Now, a moment ago, you defined the word alienated. What's the word reconciled mean? To bring back together, okay? Made right. Unite, again, reunite, yep. So Paul says that it is by the physical body of Christ, and I think he says it there because he doesn't want this confused with the body of Christ, the church that he talks about in verse 18. But he says that by the physical body of Christ, we have been reconciled to God. And through Christ, he says, we are presented to God as being holy in his sight, without blemish, and free from accusation. So now, because of Jesus Christ, God sees us as pure. He sees us as blameless and without fault. We have no spiritual debt, and we are free from accusation. What's the first word in verse 23? If. If. We can only claim that assurance, right? We can only claim that assurance that God sees us holy, blameless, free from accusation. We can only claim that assurance if we continue to put all of our faith, all of our trust, all of our confidence in the gospel of Jesus Christ.